Watch this podcast to understand and get a healthy gut naturally. It's the motivator here. I know you're here to experience another inspirational podcast, and welcome to you. Welcome. Can you help us out? We need to secure 100,000 new subscribers to the channel. Have you subscribed? Have you shared copies of links to this video with your friends, your network, the wider community? Help us to secure 100,000 new subscribers to our YouTube channel. Now you subscribe, now let's get into the interview. So I'm going to start with I'm going to refer to him for now as the good doctor. Okay. So doctor, I'm going to invite you to just introduce yourself, say who you are, your name, where you practice, and if you have particular clinical interest. Go ahead.
So my name is Ahmed Kamara. I'm a GP predominantly working in Southeast London in the Southwark area primarily. I trained initially to be a respiratory physician, so I spent many years in hospital before transitioning over to general practice. I did my undergraduate studies at Cambridge University, but before going there, I was sort of raised up really in South London, went to school in Tooting, lived in Camberwell for many years, and I'm back to that locality. So I work as what you call a portfolio GP outside of general practice. I try and be a motivator like you, although you're perhaps the original motivator.
Okay.
But just coming on platforms like these and trying to inspire people to take their health more seriously. So there's a lot that we can do for ourselves. I say the best prescription is the one that the doctor never has to prescribe, really. And I speak to schools. I've written a book, and that's me, really, in a nutshell.
Thank you, Dr. Kamara. And what you described is a young man who's grown up in South London, okay, and you went to Cambridge University. Wonderful. I'm not your father, but I feel the pride as if I'm your father now. Congratulations and
Thanks
well
very
done.
much.
No, well done,
Thank
well
you.
done, well done. And there are other young men, young boys right now listening to you, and they're from South London, from ordinary backgrounds, and they know that they can also go to Cambridge University. That's the inspiration. That's why the Motivator Show exists. Thank you. A live example. Good. Thank you, doctor. Thank you. The good Dr. Kamara. Okay. Now, if I go over to another inspirational personality, okay, I'm going to ask you to also introduce yourself, say your interest and what motivates you as well. Introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Good morning, family. My name's Pi. I am a South London boy, Brixton bred, through and through. I've been here since my parents came here probably in the late 50s. I've been here since the early 60s. I went to Brockwell Primary School, then went on to Tulsa Secondary School, then went on to college, went to Kingston University. I am a mathematician by trade. My thing is all about numbers, because numbers don't lie and people do. And on my journey, I have found out that with any system that we work with, it's important that it's underpinned by numbers. And if the numbers don't add up, then you know the system is not right. I love maths because I get to understand that we as a people, we are from maths. We are from numbers. Without numbers, we would not exist. And I'm so fascinated by the not only mathematics and its entwining in all other areas of life, but I'm fascinated by the sequences and patterns that life generates that allow us to understand what's going on around us. I'm married and I have 3 children, and
Wonderful.
Yeah, beautiful.
I have to say, the majority of my guests do not confirm that they're married with children. Okay, so I want to commend you. Don't worry, good doctor, it's fine, it's fine. I want to commend you. Married with children, you say it proudly. Well done. Yeah, well done. Well done. Okay, well done. Okay, well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know some members of the audience will be confused. Well, why would a mathematician be on a health show? Okay, that will become clearer as we proceed. Okay, because there's obviously a correlation between the two ideas. Okay, but what I want to do though, I want to now focus on the subject matter at hand, and that is the gut. Now, I've got to say, if I go to Dr. Kamara, I've got to say, I started the preparation for this particular show maybe 2 months ago. And I always ask myself these really basic questions that I inferred to you a few hours ago. Well, what is the basic questions ordinary people ask? Okay. Now, and there's an assumption we know what we mean when we say the gut. Now, I'd be really frank with you, Doctor. I know you're going to laugh, and I'm sure many are going to laugh. What did I do? I immediately went to my abdomen, my stomach. I said, well, yeah, that's my gut, isn't it? That must be my gut. Yeah? And I suspect even my good friend Pi will say the same. Well, it's my gut. My gut is the abdomen area. Okay. And of course, yes, I did take at school. The biology was one of my science subjects, and I obviously forgot whatever I learned in biology. Okay, and I'm told I represent 90% of the population. Apparently, okay, I forgot most of it. So yeah, I was focused on my tummy area, as it were. It's a straightforward question to you, my good doctor. What is the gut? Is it the abdomen or is it more than that? Please, good doctor, tell us. Just help us ordinary mortals here, please. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Luke. I am just as ordinary as all of you here and everyone else listening. Look, you're not entirely wrong by going for your abdomen. That is where the vast majority of the gut lies. When we talk about the gut, we're referring really to the digestive tract. And if you think about it, everything that's to do with taking in food into your mouth, swallowing it down your gullet, your food pipe, into the stomach, and how that food is then sort of broken down and the good bits from the food are absorbed into the body. So that all happens in the small intestine, the bit after the stomach. And beyond that, it then goes into what you might remember from those biology lessons as the large intestine, where a lot of the bacteria that we coexist with and live, and that's where feces is made before the excrement are removed from us through the anal canal. But that is the sort of digestive tract. But you're not wrong. I mean, when we refer to the guts, we're really generally referring to everything below the diaphragm. So the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine.
Okay, thank you for that. Now you must forgive me, but I said I'm over the decades I've become used to researching and studying and looking at reviewing professional papers. I know, but I try to avoid being an academic in these podcasts. Okay, so can I just take you back, and I'm going to just put a graphics on the screen. You may or may not be able to see it, and let's see. You may not be able to see it. Okay, there you go. Now, as I understand it, when we talk about the gut, we're talking about the first entrance into the gut, of course, is through the mouth. Okay, and the first actions of being able to process food is in our mouth. So, what happens in our mouth, and what the contribution to the salivary glands make to the digesting of food?
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, The importance, in fact, before we even get to the salivary gland,
Okay.
let's talk about the dentition. You know,
Okay.
someone with poor dentition struggles with eating, and they struggle with getting the adequate nutrition intake. You know, so the teeth are there to chew that food and
Right.
physically break it down.
Right.
And following on from that, the salivary gland produces digestive juices that contain chemicals we call enzymes, and particularly something called salivary amylase, that then
Yes.
breaks down mainly sort of carbohydrate components. It starts that process. But just
Right.
the mucus that's within that salivary juice helps to lubricate the bolus of food and makes it easy to swallow. So there are
Okay.
conditions where people do not produce enough saliva, so we call it, dry mouth conditions, and people struggle with with swallowing, and they have to be given artificial saliva. But assuming all is working well, so you've chewed the food, the salivary amylase has started to work, you've got a nice food bolus, well lubricated, it makes it easy to then go down the food pipe, your esophagus that you can see on the
Yes.
diagram there, or the gullet
Right.
as we tend to call it.
Okay.
And the food goes down by sort of the muscles within the walls of the esophagus gently contracting and pushing it down into the stomach. And once things get into the stomach, that's where you start to get a lot of activity um, from your hydrochloric acid, and you've also got other chemicals that then start to sort of break down proteins as well. So you get that churning process, and the food may last in the stomach for from 30 minutes to a couple of hours, depending on the type of food. Um, and that food is then expelled into the next phase, your small intestine, and all of those organs that you can see around the small intestine, so your pancreas, your bladder, your gallbladder, your liver, all contribute to the digestive process. So they all
Right.
produce chemicals. So they all need to be in good working order. They all produce chemicals that help to break the food down even more.
Right.
Um, so it goes through it's a fascinating machinery
Yes.
that we have within us that we take for granted when everything is working well. So your pancreas produces chemicals that another type of amylase that breaks down the carbohydrates. It also produces chemicals that break down proteins, so peptidases. It also produces chemicals that break down fats or lactases, and
Right.
your liver produces bile, and the
Uh-huh.
gallbladder is just a storage. It's just where bile is stored, and that
Right.
has a
Okay.
significant role in terms of fat digestion. So all of this is going on in a very seamless manner. Our brain, from the time we register something as being food, that signal goes from our eyes to our brain. The brain starts to send signals to these various organs, getting them prepared, and then there's complex intercommunication between the stomach and these other organs, and the small intestine and these other organs. And once things have been digested to, let's say, the smallest component that they can be digested to. So, in terms of carbohydrates, you're talking about glucose, which is sort of the
Right.
basic component of carbohydrate. There's something called galactose as well. There are other forms. Um, and then in terms of um, the proteins, you're talking about amino acids. And in terms of fats, you're
Yes.
talking about fatty acids.
Yes.
And these are now small enough to be absorbed within the small intestine and taken
Right.
to other parts of the body that need them. What isn't
Right.
absorbed, what is waste product, then progresses into the large intestine, and and that's where you have the bulk of the bacteria. And when we talk about gut health and interaction between those good bacteria within us,
Right.
and the interplay between them and us, and the various impacts that they can have on our health, that's where a lot of that takes place.
Can I just
And
ask
all
you
of
to
that needs
pause
to be
there?
really,
Can I ask you just to pause there just for a
yeah.
moment, because there's a lot going out. You've given us a lot of information there, and again for the audience, in the re-edited version of this show, we will have graphics on the screen. So as the doctor describes the different parts of the gut, which begins with the mouth and ends with the anus, okay, the graphics will be on screen and it will be clearly marked, just so you can better understand what is happening. So in other words, the gut is not a single organ, it's multiple organs working in concert. Okay, to process food so that we can convert it into materials that we can use to build our bodies, supply energy to our muscles and brain, and of course provide us with the materials so we can continue to reproduce, in other words. So it is fascinating as you describe it, but can I just address the issue of what's happening in our intestines? And you use the word bacteria. Now, I was fascinated, again, display my lack of awareness on these matters, that bacteria lives in our intestines. Okay, and I've found that fascinating. But it seemed my first instinct, and forgive me for if you're going to laugh at us again, doctor, is that oh, that must be dirty. I imagine that to be dirty. Well, if it's bacteria, that must be dirty, isn't it? Okay. I know you laugh at that, but that was a common refrain I received from ordinary people. They said, well, why would bacteria be involved in this and not chemicals or whatever? Why bacteria? Why is, what is so peculiar about us that bacteria is contributing to the digestive process?
Yes, it's a good point. I mean, when you think of bacteria or microbes,
Yes.
you think of infection, you think of,
Hmm.
bad things happening within us.
Yes. Hmm.
Um, Over years and years and years since we've been evolving as human beings, we've learned to coexist
Hmm.
with other organisms around us. Okay, and in this case, organisms within us, in a symbiotic manner. So their presence in us is helping us, and they're us allowing them to be within us. So by our immune system accommodating them, helps them to be in a fertile environment that allows them to propagate and have a successful lifespan as well. So it's a two-way relationship, and we have these sort of coexistence of bacteria, not just in the gut or in
Hmm.
intestinal tract, but in other parts of the body, in the bladder. In women, they
Hmm.
have it in the vagina, and
Right.
and when all is well, they really help us to function well. They help bad microbes, bad bacteria from coming in and invading us. So there's sort of those that we tend to associate with diseases and illnesses are the bad bacteria, and those sort of normal, or we call them commensal bacteria, normal
Right.
bacteria within us, actually help us to fight against them.
Okay. I'm going to ask again. You may smile when I ask this question. How do they get into our bodies? Is it through the food we're eating, or what is it? How do they propagate? In other words. Hmm.
Yes, I mean,
Hmm.
when someone is is born for the first time, they're, you can say, to use the word, they're as clean as they can be in terms of having
Yes.
any of these
Yes.
bacteria.
Yes.
Okay, so the first few months of life and what happens to you during that process determines the growth of these bacteria. So, for example,
Hmm.
if someone has a cesarean, is born by cesarean section as opposed to
Yes.
normal vaginal delivery, um, they they will. So, if you're born by cesarean section, studies have shown that your gut bacteria population won't be as healthy as someone born by normal vaginal delivery. If
Oh,
you're unfortunately unwell in the neonatal period, so this is the first month or so of birth, and require antibiotic for that reason. So antibiotic to treat an infection, so maybe something called meningitis, a serious life-threatening infection. But they're non-specific. They will also get rid of bacteria, good bacteria in other places. So that gets rid of the bacteria in your guts that we need to help us do some of these functions that I mentioned earlier. Those patients will suffer ill effects later on in life in terms of, we may come onto this, in terms of the things that bad gut health can cause in us.
Okay. Thank you. 'Cause that's at least, yeah, we will come back to this. It's a clearly an important aspect of how to maintain a healthy gut. And I want to come up to it. I know that I might have a question here about the gut and the second brain. Hi, you may have a question for the doctor?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for
Yes.
allowing me to share.
Yeah.
The question I have for the doctor is that we often talk about intelligence in terms of brain, but if we've been overlooking a second command system, which is obviously our digestive system. Now, the gut is not just for digestion, it's an ecosystem as far as I'm concerned, a communicator. And in many ways, it's actually the foundation of our well being. So, my question is, if the gut is often called the second brain, why do we treat it as an afterthought?
Hmm. Oh, that's interesting. Afterthought. Okay, doctor. Yes.
Thank you very much for your question. No, you're absolutely right, and I think it's an area, even in medicine, where knowledge is increasing all the time. There's increasingly more research being done on it. There's increasingly more focus um, in that area. So there's something called the enteric nervous system. It's just a fancy name for the connection of nerves and neurons that play a big role in our gut, in our digestive tract, and it is huge. It is a huge network of nerve connections, and there are, when we think about, so a useful example is in relation to things like stress, anxiety, depression. Um, when our gut isn't functioning well, in conditions such as irritable bowel syndrome or other inflammatory bowel diseases, those patients tend to also have a high incidence of anxiety, depression, and the use of antidepressants can be helpful in treating those gut conditions. So that's just one way, for example, of how the gut, that nervous system within the gut called the enteric nervous system, can impact the central nervous system, that is our brain and our spinal cord. Of course, the nervous system within the gut, it is not conscious, as far as we know for now. It doesn't sort
I
of
like
take
that.
part in conscious, thinking, but it does play a significant role, and it's something that we shouldn't neglect. And a program like this hopefully will, raise the profile of the importance of the gut.
Yeah. Thank you, Doctor, for the very clear answer. And that particular question is pervades the community. Is it second brain, and do we treat it as an afterthought? But of course, once you begin to understand the gut begins with the mouth, the point of entry, as it were, then you realize it's very much a forethought, in fact. But let me just continue. Let's continue on that theme. Um, how does what we eat and drink and our state of mind impact our gut health? Because this seems to be the fundamental question I receive from the community. What is our actions? How does it affect our gut health? In other words.
Yes,
Mhm,
it is really, really important
mhm.
what we eat. So let's start with what we drink, first of all.
Okay.
If you consume a lot
Yes.
of alcohol,
Yes.
that has deleterious impact, that has harmful impact on your gums, on your salivary glands, your around your jaw and below your neck. It has impact on your gullet. It has impact on stomach in terms of the development of ulcers and damaging to that lining of your gullet and your stomach. And alcohol has significant impact, we all know, on the liver. It is a major cause of chronic liver disease and liver cirrhosis, and a major cause of liver transplantation now in the Western world. And we've just talked about how the gut isn't just the intestine, it's all of those other supporting organs. So if your liver isn't working well, you're not making bile, you're not producing other chemicals that are necessary for digestion. And the food we eat. So increasingly, especially in high-income countries where we find ourselves in today, there is a lot of ultra-processed food. Now, a lot of food is processed. Even the ones that we think are whole food, they're processed because they have to be in order to just keep up with the food demand of a growing, world population. But the ultra-processed food that are designed to have a long shelf life. So that these are food that you can buy and then store on your shelf, and they remain there for weeks and months. So that's one way of thinking about ultra-processed food, or ready meals. So food that you can sort of just put in the microwave and get going straight away. These ready meals are also they have a lot of bad fat, saturated fat, and other sort of chemicals that are harmful to the gut, microbiota. So this environment that I mentioned earlier, this community of gut bacteria really depend on the quality of food products that we have. And if you're not supplying them with quality food, they're also not going to help us digest food in the right way.
Yes.
And ultimately, this will have an impact on our nutrition and the quality of the things that we end up absorbing, which will, for example, if you're not absorbing sufficient calcium, you will end up with reduced bone density, osteoporosis. If you're young, you'll end up with something called rickets. So this all have sort of long-term implication. I'll stop there for a second in case you want to come in.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot again packed in there. It's levels of awareness, of course. This is, I think, the challenge. So you started off with what we drink. So just again, I don't want you to say it again slowly on that one, because it's for example, I've got a tub of fruit juice, for example. It's quite large. Okay, is that good for my gut? But alongside that, I've got a bottle of sarsaparilla, another one that I do enjoy. I most certainly enjoy, and the other one I've got over here. Some people will recognise it, a Guinness Punch, which I occasionally drink. What would your judgment be on those drinks, Doctor?
Well, look, you know,
I like your smile.
I think life, yeah, life is has got to be around will. I mean, to make this life fun for all of us. There has to be one has got to be able to accommodate different things in your life, but in moderation in certain instances. In terms of those drinks that you mentioned, the best way to think about it is the more natural the drink is, and like food, the more natural the food is, the more healthy it is for you. Now, the juice that you mentioned is going to be more healthy than I think the sarsaparilla and the Guinness Punch, but even juices that you get from the supermarket.
Yep.
If you get the fresh orange and squeeze it at home, now again that's going to be a lot better than what's in the supermarket. So again, there are levels and there are levels, and then it all also comes down to what's practical, what's affordable.
Yes.
Health isn't just making a decision about having what's good for you. It's also about what's accessible to you from geographical point of view, from a financial point of view. We all know about the cost of living
Living.
now. And when you talk about public health, it's not just the decision people make on a day-to-day basis about what they eat. Sometimes that decision um, is greatly influenced by, to use the words of the mathematician, the numbers in the bank account.
Yes. Yes.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, that determines what you can afford to buy. And for
Yes.
most
Yes.
people, that is what determines the quality of food that they can afford.
Well said. In other words, the health inequalities that we have at the moment is maybe the biggest problem we have in this society. Okay? The cheapest food is usually the most highly processed food and containing less nutrients and fiber, which we have not touched yet so far, in our food. And with a consequence, it has long-term potential, I'm going to use the word harmful impact, most certainly potentially shortening one's life. It's not obvious, but it is interesting. In the borough that you and I reside, we said Southwark, there are parts of the borough where there's up to 10 years difference in the life expectancy of residents. Okay, most certainly the southern part of the borough versus the middle part of the borough, up to 10 years difference, and they're only about 2 to 3 miles apart. That is truly
Absolutely.
astonishing. And that's really, and the demarcation lines is economic. Yep, it's economic. Yep, it's social profiling. So it is profound, and whilst this show is not designed to um, address the cost of living crisis and reduce these inequities, um, it is intended to raise the awareness of the impacts of the cost of living crisis and at least begin to address what is necessary for individuals to do in order to maintain a healthy gut cheaply. That's what I want to address. So you mentioned what we drink, okay, and I just want you in further describing how to maintain a healthy gut, how that relates to physical exercise and our state of mind.
Yes, no, there is an interplay between.
Mhm,
It's not just a sort of one direction. Um,
mhm,
a healthy gut will, it's well understood, will improve your mental state of being,
mhm,
will improve your psychological well-being. But likewise, you know, being highly stressed, being anxious, being depressed, or having
mhm,
other psychological problems can have a detrimental impact on your gut.
mhm,
People with um, mental health conditions tend to have a high propensity of irritable bowel syndrome, or symptoms of um, bowel dysfunction, digestive dysfunction, and the same happens in return. So it is important to eat healthily to promote a healthy gut in order to help your mind. Likewise, it is important to also actively work on your mind, doing the mindfulness, meditation, reading, and helpful things, and surrounding yourself with supportive people. Um, that will also help your gut. Physical activity is also really, really important.
mhm.
Sorry, were you going to say something? Yeah.
Yes, I was going to just. I'm not sure I've understood the relationship between our state of mind and its impact on our gut. Why are the two related? Sure, because the mind is quite a
Yeah.
separate. Our brain is quite separate from our gut. I know the head contains the mouth, which is the beginning of it. Yeah, but the brain is a very distinct and separate organ. Why are the two related? Ex- mm,
Two reasons. The two forms of communication we have within us, the nervous system, and then something called the endocrine system. This is where communication happens by the production of chemicals that go into the bloodstream that then circulate around the body. We talked earlier about the nervous system within the gut. We call it the enteric nervous system. And the gut microbiome, the gut microbes, bacteria, viruses, and fungi within the gut have a huge impact on that system by the chemicals that those organisms produce. And that system is in direct communication with our central nervous system. That is what is thought to be how it works. Again, a lot of research has been done on this. There are models, but the importance of that communication is now recognized. The gut microbiome, the bacteria, fungi, and viruses within the gut also produce chemicals that enter the bloodstream, which can impact distant organs, including the brain. So that's another way of how the gut can influence the brain. So in terms of a mechanism of action, that's the link.
I understand you now. Thank you. In other words, it's important for us to endeavor, he says, to meditate, to maintain a calm persona so that we do not inadvertently generate chemicals or stimulate hormonal responses that affect the efficient operation of our gut, in short. Yep.
Absolutely. And just let me just say one thing. An easy way of really that most people would sort of recognize this relationship is it's just when you're stressed, you're called up all of a sudden to stand at the front of the room and give a speech or speak out about something, or you're going for an interview. Think about what happens to your gut then. For most people, they will develop fast sort of rate of metabolism of things going through their gut. Some might even develop diarrhea. Some might develop bloating. So that's just one way of how these things interact.
Thank you. That's very clear. And physical exercise, does that explain why that relates to our gut, our impact on its gut? Why would my running impact my gut's operation? That, again, seems quite separate and distinct activities. What's the relationship between the two?
Yeah, it's a good question. Now, in maths, they always say that there's correlation and then there is causation, and sometimes correlation doesn't always equal causation. But we know that physical exercise is good for our health in general. Okay, we know that there are a lot of sort of positive associations. We don't always know how that works precisely at a microscopic level. But being physically active helps to lower your cholesterol, helps to reduce the development of obesity, and obesity is thought to have a key impact on gut health. So all of these things that play in a very complex system. If someone is obese, they tend to be more insulin resistant. They tend to have a more inflammatory. I'm being quite careful of the words that I'm using here for the audience. They tend to have a sort of a more inflammatory environment within their body. That means certain diseases are more likely to happen. So if you have more inflammation happening within your body, you're more likely to develop inflammatory conditions like certain autoimmune conditions, certain cardiovascular conditions like stroke, heart attack, and it's also a driver of things like cancer. And obesity is a significant driver of cancer nowadays.
Okay. And just to check, you use the term insulin resistance. Is that a forgive my use of the term euphemism for diabetes, or not? I just won't get.
Great question. No, it's a great question. You can be insulin resistant and not have diabetes.
Indeed.
Okay, as long as your body is still able to make sufficient insulin to do what the insulin needs to do. So now that all sounds very complex, but insulin, to just break it down, insulin helps us to reduce our blood sugar. When the blood sugar goes up, we produce insulin from our pancreas, and this takes blood sugar or glucose into our cells, mainly our liver and muscle cells. Okay. If someone is insulin resistant, it means that the amount of insulin that you need to do that job goes higher and higher.
Okay.
That then has, again, the body is so complex that has a lot of implications in terms of how it affects other organ systems. But you can imagine if someone is insulin resistant, ultimately, however much insulin they start off with in their pancreas, they're going to run out of insulin quicker than if they were not insulin resistant. So it increases their risk of developing diabetes later on in life.
I understand. Thank you. That's much clearer. And I'll, again, for the audience, that explanation, I will produce graphics to demonstrate the words uttered by the doctor, and and you'll see it in operation. In other words, the raising the need for us to produce more insulin in order to have the same effect. We know we've seen people who take drugs over a long period of time developing a resistance to those drugs and less effective. That's an example of it. Can I just to probe a little further on this, because this is again what I hear on the doorsteps when I talk to people and try to encourage them to think healthily, eat the right food, and so on. Okay, and I did want to just focus on what you said in relation to what we eat. Okay, and its relationship to promoting good, healthy gut. Okay, would you be clear? Quite a message here. Is the doctor saying that we should eat raw or increased amount of raw food, like raw vegetables and so on, and less meat? Or is he saying we can eat more meat and less vegetables? It's one of those. I think you'd smile at that one, but we're seeking your advice and guidance. There you are.
Yeah. So look, when you think about food, there are three main components of food: carbohydrate, proteins, and fat. Okay, and we need to be consuming enough of all of them in order to be healthy. Specifically, as it relates to gut health and this, the bacteria, viruses, and fungi within our gut, having food that's rich in fiber is very, very important. And fiber comes mainly from vegetables.
Forgive me interrupting there. Can you just describe what you mean by fiber? Because this is a really important word. I've researched; it's really important. But can you just clarify, for the benefit of the audience, what you mean by fiber?
Yeah. So fiber is mainly plant-based and comes from vegetables like beans and legumes. You can also get it from bread and cereal as well. A lot of fiber comes from nuts and seeds. Okay, so you get fiber from plant-based food, not from animal products. And it is really, really important for bacteria within our gut. It helps them to do the job that they need to do in order to break down products and help everything to work in an orderly manner.
Good. So in other words, fiber is obtained from plants and not meat.
That's right.
But I understand that meat tends to remain in our intestines longer than plants, which implies that meat contains more fiber. There you are.
Well, I guess a lot of animals are grass fed, right? So they are going to have some fiber within them. They're not. It's not. It's not going to entirely just be proteins. Within animal
Okay.
products. But if you want to consume, a huge amount of fiber, then yes,
Yes, it is intended.
from
Okay.
the
All right.
plant based.
All right. Okay. Those are just those further questions that I receive on the doorstep when speaking to residents locally, and yes, I have to do that quite often, and I will later today apparently. But anyway, so these obvious questions that are regularly received by myself. But I know at this point, Pi may have a question about are we healing or doing something else? But Pi, you may have a quick question here for the doctor. First of all, Pi, I believe on your side we're receiving some echoes. I wonder if there's a speaker in your room that is repeating. No, okay. I'm going to unmute you now. I'm going to unmute. It's okay. I see that. It's okay. Okay, go ahead with your question anyway. Don't worry. Go ahead with your question.
I'm actually hearing feedback myself. Well, when you put me on mute, I get a feedback doubling up. So I'm not sure what's going on there.
If it's possible on your computer, you may have a tab open with this podcast playing at the same time. Maybe that's what it is. No, if not, don't worry.
No.
Ask your question anyway. Ask your question. Don't worry. Ask your question.
Okay. Doctor, the question
Are we
I'd like
healing?
to ask.
Yeah.
The question I'd like to ask is, we have prescribed solutions often, and we know they often target symptoms, but if the gut is central to immunity and overall health, are we addressing the root cause or simply quietening the body's natural distress signals? And if we silence the signals long enough, what happens to the underlying problem? So in other words, are we healing or merely suppressing?
Yeah. So thanks very much for the question. I was just saying, just to clarify, what sort of prescriptions are you referring to?
Antibiotics, for example. Any antibiotics that you get generally have side effects. And so basically what I'm asking is, well, if that is the case, are we healing or merely suppressing? Because to me, it suggests that yes, we have antibiotics, but as a doctor that antibiotics causes many issues. It may solve a problem,
All
but
right.
it causes
got the
other
question.
issues.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
You've got the question. Sorry.
Thank you,
Doctor.
Yes. No. Thanks very much. Look, antibiotics have a really, really important role to play in terms of our health in general. When it's needed at the right time. So when someone has severe infection that could potentially become life-threatening, or something called, sepsis or blood poisoning. If that infection gets into the bloodstream, then it becomes very difficult to control. If you speak to most intensive care doctors, out of anything that goes through intensive care, the most challenging one to control and address is blood poisoning or septicemia. So you never really want an infection to get to that stage. But at the same time, the challenge is a lot of minor illnesses, flu-like illnesses, at the early stage mimic potentially life-threatening infections. So if someone has a cough and a cold and they're coughing up phlegm and they're feeling really poorly, most of the time it's because of a self-limiting viral infection that will go away without any prescribed intervention. But it isn't always the case, and even a doctor might not be able to tell you that your viral infection is not going to actually turn out to be a potentially serious bacterial infection. But the important thing is being aware of the worrying signs. And when a patient comes to see me or any clinician, it's educating that patient that their symptoms at the moment are self-limiting, but also telling that patient what to look out for. What are the signs of deterioration? So, if someone's is coughing up phlegm and they're getting quite breathless, their appetite is significantly reducing, their conscious level, they're getting quite confused, that's a worrying sign. They may be developing a pneumonia. If someone has got flu-like illnesses, they've developed, a rash that's not going away. We talk about, blanching rashes. But really, from a patient point of view, a fever and a rash of any description, a rash that you don't normally have, you should seek medical advice, because that can be meningitis. So serious infections you don't want to miss. But sometimes, to save someone's life, you've got to prescribe the antibiotic, and there are consequences to this. To come to your point, whenever you prescribe an antibiotic, you're not just treating the infection that you're trying to address, the serious infection, but you're also going to affect bacteria that we normally have within us. You're going to affect your gut bacteria, and it's going to take time to replenish.
Well said, doctor. That's very clear. And he's nodding. He's the mathematician. If he's nodding, you know the odds on that you're right. Can I now just take us on to another area of interest, where there's a suggestion that gut health is related to our ethnicity? Okay. I just wanted to put this question to you, because it is one that is a common refrain. That can you really summarize the potential signs that our gut is not functioning optimally, and the impacts on Black, African, and Caribbean communities, that there's a higher incidence of lactose intolerance, can lead to reduced dietary consumption, potential calcium deficiency, increased risk of obesity, and the metabolic diseases can negatively impact our gut. Is that particularly prevalent in African communities, Black communities, or indeed other communities, or is it really a result of lifestyle and social conditioning?
Yeah. So lots of questions within that question.
I'm sorry. Yes.
So there is the sign of the gut not functioning well, and then there's a relationship between gut function and ethnicity, and then specifically lactose intolerance and obesity. So let's address the first one. It is really important to know what's normal for us, as in for each and every single one of us. Okay, because there isn't any one size fits all, especially when it comes to symptoms within the body. So it's really important for all of us to know, well, what is our normal gut function? Are we someone who normally opens our bowels once a day, twice a day? Do we tend to have stool that's of a more looser consistency or more solid constipated consistency? Have we ever seen fresh blood in our stool? And the first time you see blood in your stool, you should always seek medical advice. But if you've been sort of diagnosed as having pile or hemorrhoid, which is something relatively benign and common, and of no major consequence, and you get familiar with that sort of bleeding for yourself. Now, are you noticing blood in the stool for the first time, as an adult? Are you noticing bleeding that's of a different pattern from what you're used to if you've been told that you have piles? Do you sometimes bloat when you eat certain food? Or is your bloating now a new thing? So knowing what's normal for you is really, really important. And that's the same for, any part of the body. So when things stop being normal, you should seek advice for yourself, because that change for you might be quite significant. So that's the first thing to say.
Forgive me, doctor. I just want to say that somewhat what you said very slowly, because it's a really important point I want to get across to the audience. If they see that, just say it again, because what you're really saying, I think, is that if there's a change in your stool that you not normally see, particularly if you see blood, you should I'm going to say must go to a doctor and have it checked out. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think know what's normal for you, and
Hmm.
any change from normality should
Hmm.
prompt you to seek medical advice, not to necessarily
Okay.
panic, but
No,
to seek medical advice.
that's right.
Because often, late presentation to your doctor
Yeah,
means late diagnosis, means diagnosis being made at a more advanced stage, which means less cure
that's
for
right.
whatever it is that is going on.
Thank you. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
what you repeat. So just continue in terms of the
Yeah.
relationships
So
and the
so so
impact of
so
ethnicity and
having
biscuits.
having
Mhm,
noticed that change,
mhm.
as we've said, should prompt you to seek advice. But then there are also important red flag, we call red flag symptoms. Okay.
Yes.
So you mentioned blood in the stool. Um, are you have you developed new diarrhea that's sort of going on for
Mm,
more than a week, and it's not, it's or even just loose stool. If you
yes.
used to have more constipated stool or solid stool, is your stool more runny or more watery, or has it gone the other way? If you used to
Hmm.
open your bowel every single day, are you going once every 3 or 4 days now? That should raise concern if that's persisting over a number of weeks. And if you're experiencing other worrying associated symptoms with it, such as abdominal pain, or
Yes.
pain on defecation, pain on passing stool, even without
Right.
blood, should
Yes.
should raise concern for you. And you should also be aware of your your family history.
Mhm.
So, if you've got a family history of cancer in general, but especially if you've got a family history of bowel cancer and you're noticing this change, you should take this more seriously because
Yes.
the genetics interplay with the environment. Now, in terms of gut health and ethnicity,
Mhm.
a lot of studies been done about this recently. But when you look at the literature in general, unfortunately, there haven't been a lot of studies that it actually looked at gut health, in ethnic minorities. There's one significant study done, published quite recently, I think in January, in Nature, a very, very high impact scientific journal, which actually looked at the gut health amongst Africans living in Africa, in
Yes.
5 or 6 different countries
I've
that
read it.
included Kenya,
Yes, I've
Ghana,
read
South
it.
Africa,
Mm,
um, and and what was interesting about that was they found that the significant determinant of what your gut microbiome is your geography, so where you lived. Okay,
mm, mhm.
so if you had, let's just take for example, if you had someone who is a Ghanaian but now lives in Kenya, their gut
Mhm.
microbiome is going to be quite similar to Kenyans living in Kenya. So the geography mattered more than your genetic or your heritage.
Mm,
But what they also found was bacteria that were thought to be almost inexistent or absent in urban communities in the Western world, in high income countries, were highly prevalent in city dwellings, in these African
okay.
cohorts of patients that were
Right.
studied. They found, if I remember right, something like over 1,000 different new bacterial genes and over
Mhm.
40,000 new viral genomes for the first time that were, so that's, and what does that tell us?
Mhm.
The medicines that we take and the way they're broken down and the effects they have on us all dependent on the bacteria that we think are within us,
Right.
right?
Right.
So if there is this new population of bacteria that we didn't know about previously, then you
Mhm.
can imagine why certain medications might work well for one person, but not work so well for another person,
Okay.
just purely
Okay.
because of the different gut microbiota. But
Right.
let's make this more specific to ethnic minorities living in Western world. And there have been studies
Mhm.
done in the States and in Netherlands, um, and and what they found again was that there were distinct differences based on ethnicity, but of key significance was the cohabitation. So who you lived with. So they looked at various generations of families to look at the genetic components of your gut microbiota, but then looked at where people lived. So a simple way of explaining this is if you're related to someone, but then live in a different location to that person, you're more likely to have a similar gut microbiota, a similar sort of gut bacteria composition as someone that you live with, but who may be unrelated to you, compared to someone who is actually related to you. So, your environment is a key determinant, and that's similar to what they've also found in some of the studies in America as well.
Mm. What does that mean in that
I can
case,
see
Doctor?
you wanna come in there.
Yes, I'm trying to work out what does that mean because it sounds
So
contradictory.
yeah, no, it's a good
Yes,
question.
yes.
It's a good question. And so what does that mean? So the people within your four walls matter more in terms of influencing your gut microbiota. And then beyond your four walls, the people that you associate with more will tend to influence your gut microbiota more than just simply because, someone is a family member or you're of the same ethnicity or race. That's what that finding is suggesting. There are marked differences in terms of ethnicity, but a key driver is actually who you live with, your geographical location, or proximity to someone determines your gut microbiota more.
Okay.
Now, of course, if
Yes.
you are of a particular ethnicity, you're more likely to live with people of that ethnicity. You're more likely to also live in the same household as people who are related to you. So, we call this confounding factors,
Right.
and it's difficult to tease out, what's actually driving.
Right. Okay.
And more studies need to be done. As I said, in terms of gut health, the research that's been done looking at the contribution of ethnicity into gut health is increasing day by day, but there isn't enough data compared to the overall body of gut health research.
Okay. So I think what you're saying is that our close proximity to each other, we either inadvertently or deliberately exchange through our food and the touch usual lifestyle. We're actually exchanging part of ourselves subconsciously, either through the food, the utensils we use, or all ways in which we are transferring aspects of ourselves to another person. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of infection control, right? I mean,
Indeed,
these are
indeed, yes.
it's infection control. So if you're no matter how clean you are, you're going to be contaminated after using the bathroom, and you're going to touch things, and people close to you are going to touch those
Yeah,
things. You
yes,
might cough, aerosol
yes,
material, etc. So it makes it
yes.
a lot easier for you to over time to then accumulate similar bacteria population to people
So,
closer to you.
so in other words, um, it's not the ethnicity that's the distinctive point here; it's proximity.
Well, probably they both are probably playing
Okay,
a
all right.
role, but the proximity
Hmm.
is important. I mean, the study that's looked at Africans in African has found max differences based on their geographical location, but then
Right.
overall, there's been max differences as a group compared to studies done in high income countries. So
Okay.
there's probably an interplay of both. Both are important.
So I'm just conscious of time now, so I'm going to show my next question very quickly. If our gut is not functioning correctly, what should we do? Because it's not functioning. What should the first steps that any member of the audience should do? What should they do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, recognizing what's normal from what's not normal for you is important. We talked about those important red flag symptoms: blood in the stool, pain on defecation, associated abdominal pain. These are important symptoms that should prompt you to seek medical advice. We talked about the impact of antibiotic on our gut microbiome. Now, anyone who, after taking antibiotic or after having a diarrheal illness, your gut microbiology is going to be distinctly different from what it was previously. And there are things that you can do, such as taking prebiotic, and probiotics. Okay, so these are usually yogurt-based drinks with particular bacteria that are thought to be healthy for your gut. Now, a lot of the issue, I'm not a dietitian, but I know that a lot of the issue with probiotics is they get they sort of get damaged, so to speak, by the high acid content within the stomach, and so don't really have the effects that they need to have. So there's a thought that if you have prebiotics, so food that get through the stomach and then act as almost like fertilizers for good bacteria to then be able to grow within your bowel, will help. So if you've been recently had antibiotic, or you're having antibiotic, or you've recently had a diarrheal illness, it is highly important for you to take, consider taking, probiotic and prebiotic, as well as doing all those other things that we spoke about. Eating more healthily, more fiber, exercising more, making sure that you're drinking enough water.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. That's much clearer, and you've led up very well to this point. Pi, I think you may have a question here. If our gut is micro, I'm going to just unmute you, sorry, because avoiding the feedback. Go ahead, Pi. Yes.
As I've heard on the platform today, we all recognize the importance of biodiversity in nature. Yet inside us exists a vast microbial world that we disrupt daily with processed foods, as you mentioned, antibiotics, and modern diets. So are we knowingly disabling the very system designed to sustain us? Because that system is very precise. So, in other words, if our gut microbiome is an ecosystem, which I believe it is, are we its caretakers or its biggest threat?
Yeah, I mean, we are probably its biggest threat, and I think it is an awareness that is lacking. It is an awareness that is lacking, and the more aware we become about the importance of our gut microbiome, the more we can do to help to protect and maintain it. And I think there are a lot of good things about living in the times that we're living in. Antibiotics have save a lot of lives. Vaccinations, whatever you feel about them, have saved a lot of lives. Eating, having lots of food, saves a lot of lives. But then there are consequences that come with all of these things as well. Okay, and if you don't recognize this, it doesn't mean you shouldn't take antibiotic, because when you do need it for life-threatening infection, you should have antibiotic. Otherwise, that will take your life away, not the fact that your gut microbiome is not as optimal as possible. But you want to use them responsibly. That's the thing. And same with processed food. You want to consume them as minimally as you can get away with, and as you can afford, and try to consume whole foods as much as possible, or the least processed food as much as possible. We all don't have back gardens here to grow our own crops. We don't have little farms. If we did, that probably will be helpful. Not not everyone has access to allotments. But if you can grow things in places like that, yes, it would help. Cook more for yourself, because if you're cooking, you're most likely using whole foods, right? Maybe go and shop more. Go to the market and shop, rather than just getting things off the internet. If you go to the shop, the local market, you have Brixton Market, East Street Market locally in Deptford or Lewisham. You can actually get whole food, really fresh, relatively fresh ingredients that will be more helpful for the gut.
Thank you. That's very, very clear. Very, very well responded to. Very well responded to. Um, I want to put my last question to you, and hopefully this will help you. How can the community support your work to raise awareness about a healthy gut? How can we help you to communicate these messages? What can we do to help you? Or indeed to help ourselves, he says.
No, look, I think, health care is a two-way relationship between health practitioners and the population at large. I'm a GP, so I have an interest in health in general, not just gut health, and I put out material on my YouTube channel, Doctor to You,
Oh, I'll put that on the screen, shall I?
on various.
I'll put it on the screen whilst you're speaking. There you go.
Yeah,
Keep speaking.
thank you.
Go ahead. There you go. Keep talking.
On various,
Keep going.
yeah, on various health topics. So that's one way of connecting with me, and I try and as you've been doing here, asking me to really break things down. I really try and break things down so that it's well understood by someone who's never read biology, never read about medicine. And I think that's really important. That's a value sometimes in the job that we do. It's not about how much knowledge you necessarily have or how much training you have, but if that patient walks out of the room without really getting what you're trying to get across to them, then you've done them a disservice. So that's the same approach that I have with the YouTube channel as well.
Wonderful. I would include a link to your YouTube channel in the chat on this particular podcast, so that those of you who want to hear your wise words, good doctor, can connect to your YouTube channel, and I'll include a further excerpts connecting to your channel in the final edited version of this interview. Okay. Now, this has been fantastic as an intro to understanding the gut and its importance to our general health and well-being. And I want to thank you for responding to my sometimes, well, they're just ordinary communal questions, I have to say. What is the gut? As I said, I pointed to my stomach effectively, but anyway, and that simply is an indication that, as is the case for most people, if they've not studied biology for good 20, 30, 40 or 50 years, it is surprisingly how little we know about ourselves as a physical being, and raising that awareness does of course contribute to improving general health and well-being. And it's quite evident from this interview, the information you've shared today, and there's much more you could share, and I will include some additional data and facts and figures, that with that awareness, most people can make good decisions. And that's what I think what you're about, encouraging people to make good decisions based on good information. And you are clearly the person to share that information.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to share this platform with both yourself and Pi. Thank you so much.
And I also would say that the good doctor, Kamara, came at the last moment. The previous person I intended couldn't be here, and the good doctor stepped in with confidence. And this was a truly inspirational podcast. Thank you, Doctor. I'm going to let you go now. I'm going to let you go. But thank you for sparing this time with us. It's been truly tremendous. And I will continue to promote your YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Well, Pi, that was something else, wasn't it? That was quite remarkable. Oh, cool. Let me just unmute you. Give right. Yeah, that was quite remarkable, wasn't it?
Really was.
Really was.
Very intense.
Now, I know. Just before we go, I did want you to talk about your interest in this subject. Because you're a mathematician. So you're a mathematician, okay? It seems, forgive me, some distance from biology, as it were. Okay,
Mm,
but
mm.
you're now going to tell us why the two are related and why you've taken interest in our health. Explain.
Well, in my studies, I believe that the gut is one of our main central processing units, and it's really important that
And the
we
doctor
understand.
agrees with you. The doctor agrees with you.
Yes, yes, and it's really important that we by highlighting gut health. For me, it's crucial because it directly impacts our overall well-being. Now, the gut houses 70 to 80% of the immune system, which influences mental health through neurotransmitter production and is key to nutrient absorption. An imbalanced gut can lead to chronic disease, inflammation, and deficiencies. And so, focusing on gut health can prevent long term health issues and foster a holistic approach to well
Mhm,
being, empowering people to make healthier choices. And because um, I, I, I run a program where I hear the concerns and the issues that many of us brothers are going through,
mhm,
and I hear the pain and
mhm.
the suffering that they are
Yes,
going
yes,
through. And it's
yes.
only when we are really able to break these down and put the numbers in place that they really understand what is going on, and how they can find a solution.
Mhm. Tell us a little bit more. Obviously, you're speaking to men and about their health, and they are opening up.
Mm, mm.
You would have heard I said earlier on, want to encourage men to go to the doctor and not be
Yes, of
be
course.
strong men and and all that nonsense.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
uh, what are the real concerns you think are as you have that dialogue with particularly men
Mm.
and their health? Let's take this particular subject in relation to the gut. And what are they concerned about this? Tell us. Give us some idea of their thinking. Mhm,
Well, I'm going to be totally honest with you.
mhm.
Our brothers, when they are ill, um, they lose confidence.
Yes, of course, of course.
They are afraid.
Yes,
Uh, um, their ego precedes them. They don't
indeed.
really want to listen to advice, and they end up sticking their head in the sand.
Yeah,
Why do I know this? Because I went through this.
indeed.
I went through
Yeah.
myself, and so it's really important that as men, the reason why we're afraid is because we're taught to be strong, as you mentioned. As a man, he's supposed to be strong, and it can't be seen to be whimpering and all that sort of stuff. But the
Yeah.
truth of the matter is this: is that many of the brothers who come on the platform, they're suffering from illnesses sometimes that their partners don't even are not
Hmm.
aware of,
Hmm.
because of confidence, and they're afraid and whatever else, and they're able to share. They're able to share. We have brothers who, suffering from erectile dysfunction, for example, for years. And how do you share this with anybody?
Hmm.
By coming on the platform, we
Yeah.
share because we care, and by sharing, we hear somebody else who's going through or may have gone through, and whatever solutions they have found, they're able to share it. you
Yes.
know
Yes.
but as the doctor says, it's really important that when you see your body malfunctioning,
Yes.
that you seek medical advice, because by getting the advice, you then know the state that you are in.
Indeed. Yes.
And that
Yes.
really is the key, because once you know
Yes.
the condition you are in, then you can make the numbers add up.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Thank you for that. Thank you. What
Mm.
I'm going to do in the edited version of this interview, I'll
Sure.
put details of your of your group and the support you offer in the link, so that it's clear to people how to contact yourself. So be aware, as I will do
Thank
for
you.
the good doctor. It's not a problem. Not a problem. What did you learn today, though, that was most striking, that you may not have known prior to this interview?
Well, I'm not a doctor, and a lot of the stuff that was mentioned, you know, I took some notes, but there's quite a bit that kind of flew over.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it reminded me of how complex we are as
Yes.
individuals. Because when you
Yes.
speak about the gut and you speak about the complexity of a particular area of your body,
Yes.
it's mesmerizing.
It is. It
It's
is.
mesmerizing. These bacteria that we're referring to, and fungi, and that we're referring to, that sit in our microbiome, they have
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Yes, indeed. They're an integral
They
part of
have
us.
relationship.
Yes.
They have
Yes.
relationships, and
Yes.
those relationships are key
Mm-hmm.
to our well-being.
That's right.
And if if so, if the gut is imbalanced, because from my understanding,
Mm-hmm.
from my mathematical understanding,
Mm-hmm.
I understand that the majority of diseases that we walk around with, they
Mm-hmm.
start from the gut.
Yes. Yes.
Because
Yes.
illness doesn't come upon you in one day.
Mm.
Illness comes upon you after a period of time.
Yes.
So if we know that the gut is the central unit for our illnesses, then we must support our ecosystem, because that's what it
That's
is.
right.
It's our
That's
internal
really said.
ecosystem.
Well said. Yep. Well said. Well said. Yes.
And when a gut is imbalanced, it's no different than if you've ever listened to an orchestra warming up at the beginning, absolute chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only when the conductor taps his baton
Mm-hmm.
that harmony reigns.
That's right.
And your microbiome is like
Mm-hmm.
an orchestra.
Absolutely.
And as long as there is balance,
Mm-hmm.
harmony will reign. And when there is dysbiosis, imbalance, it's no different than that orchestra warming up at the beginning. Absolute chaos.
That's
And
right.
that causes many of the issues that we are experiencing today
Mm-hmm.
and not even talking about.
That's right. That's right. And here on the Motivator Show, we will talk about them. Because in doing so, we take the veil of shame and secrecy away from it, and can be fully exposed to our abilities to resolve the issues. We join hands together, we will resolve these issues together. You are not alone. And that's the key message we want to get from this interview. You are not alone. Ask and we will provide you with the information. And with that information, you can make the right decision for yourself, your family, your loved ones, your networks. Okay. But it starts with you. Reparations begins with you. Self-repair. Yeah. That confidence comes from you. Oh yeah, well done. I needed to make sure that message was clearly communicated, Pi, because you're the
Thank you.
mathematician. And you can do the stats, and you can see that we're moving the dial in the right direction. I hope you'd agree with that.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Absolutely.
There you go. In that case, and I think we're now ready. We're now slightly over time, but it is well, and it was good to have you there asking those questions. You know, because it's I asked a lot of questions, but your questions were most certainly direct and poignant. Okay, and yeah, what did you want to say in conclusion? Yeah.
I say, you know, I really think it's, you know, I have
I'm
taken
sorry.
a major
Sorry. Yeah.
I've taken a major interest in the gut microbiome because I was ill. You
Okay.
know, I was ill. I
Mhm.
had enlarged prostate. I
Okay.
had circulation issues. I had internal issues. You know, my um, the dysbiosis of my microbiome was off the chart.
Yeah. Okay.
The imbalance, the gut was imbalanced,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it causes all kind of problems. I went for blood tests, I went for bioscan, and when you looked at the numbers, you could see the imbalance. And the first thing I had to do was get my gut balanced. And once I was able to get my gut balanced, and then the doctor spoke about probiotics, prebiotics, targeted nutrients that basically dealt with the issue. So, and here I am today, alive and kicking, looking really well, and telling my own story. And that is really the key. Our gut, we don't realize how important it is. Many of us brothers who are suffering from cholesterol, heart issues, circulation problems, erectile dysfunction. It's really important to understand that all of these symptoms originated from the gut, and it didn't just overwhelm you overnight. It's been building up for a number of years, and so it's really important that we start to take note and we understand the numbers behind the microbiome.
That's a key message we want all the entire audience to receive. Thank you for that final bit. That was a missing component for this interview. That statement from what you just made. That's really important. It starts in the gut. You've got to be conscious of it. And if in doubt, ask questions. I keep saying that. Ask questions. I'll put details to how you can contact Pi and the groupings that he belongs to. He's a genius mathematician. Let me tell you, I don't mind saying that in public. He's a genius mathematician. Okay, he thinks about the numbers and the risk factors. He wouldn't be here if he didn't believe that this particular interview, from a probability of success point of view, was likely to be impactful, therefore successful. Okay, so I'm honored that he was here today, and we're getting back again because there's much more to be said about this young man that we haven't had a chance to do today. And trust me, there's much more here that meets the eye. Thank you, Pi, for being my guest today, and you listened intensely.
Thank you for having me.
Oh no, you listened intently. I noted all those notes. There are many references which I'm going to include in the commentary for this show that both yourself and others can refer to. I want you and the audience to continue to be your own researchers, investigators, so you can acquire the knowledge for yourself in the manner that's best suited for you. But with that knowledge is empowerment, and through empowerment is action that will better for yourself, your family, your loved ones, and wider community. And together we will transform the world. It's the Motivator here. I hope you enjoyed that fantastic podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, or at the very least give us a like. And don't forget the next video on screen. Click through and enjoy. It's the Motivator here. I hope you enjoyed that fantastic podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, or at the very least give us a like. And don't forget the next video on screen. Click through and enjoy.